This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, so welcome back everyone. In till the last segment, we have seen about the different ways in which the requirements documentation happens, right? We looked into it and we saw that for Agile, it is mostly in the format of user stories, whereas for Waterfall, you can use things beyond BRD and FRD. Within these documents, you can use, you know, your use cases or use case diagrams and sometimes flowcharts and all those things. So, whether it is waterfall or agile, there are few things that we need to keep in mind so that our documentation is as much effective and efficient as possible. Okay, so I thought of just covering those points in the slide, and then we can complete the discussion on documentation and move on to the next segment. Okay, so first of all, here we'll talk about the waterfall project related points, and then we'll move towards the agile. Okay, so in waterfall, the first thing is that we have a comprehensive requirement gathering. Means what happens here is there is a requirement of having a detailed documentation upfront. What do I mean by upfront is uh, in the very first phase of your project, roughly assuming a project to be of around say 10 months of duration, you might spend the first 1.5 to 2 months only in the documentation of the entire set of requirements. So upfront you capture all the documents, all the requirements in the document. Okay, so invest this time in thorough requirement gathering. Whatever method required, maybe you conduct workshops or interviews or sometimes surveys or whatever is required, you will take part in all of these things to ensure that you have all the information and that can help in proper documentation. For example, think that you're working on a software project related to some e-commerce website, something like Amazon, for example. So you need to have information related to all the features. Is it about inventory management or customer accounts or payments or checkout process or order history? All of these things. So similarly for your food delivery app also, whatever features are there, you need to ensure that you have comprehensive requirements. Okay. Once you have the requirement, that will help in coming up with a detailed business requirement document and the functional requirement document, right? Because here you will be able to clearly outline the business goals and the high level requirements. And when it comes to FRD, if sometimes it becomes necessary to add in some information about the technical details also. Going beyond the use cases sometimes, maybe data structures, system interfaces related information. So if you're clear with the business requirements, you will be able to take it across to the tech lead and add few points relevant to the technical information also in your FRD. So we need to be sure on the business requirements and be able to comprehensively add all that details in the document. Third point is about the sequential documentation. So here, it's a misconception that documentation always is supposed to be done by the business analyst itself. Because in a waterfall, what happens is you create a BRD or an FRD, and then the design team creates their own, documentation, which could be even not a document, but a set of screens on Figma or something like that. And then there'll be some design document to explain those points. And then the development team may create an architecture diagram and a few other technical details specification document. The test team will prepare a test strategy document, test cases, and all those things. So documentation is required in every phase, and it happens in a sequential format. Means first you create a BRD and FRD, which serves as an input for the design documentation, which in turn serves as an input for your technical details specification, which will help in test case documentation, all those things. Okay, so here we need to make sure that each phase is having enough information so that it can pick that details from the previous phase and provide the serve as an input for the next phase. Okay. Change control again is very important because we need to have a robust change control process so that any changes to requirements are formally documented. It's not just you heard about it from one of the stakeholders and you started implementing it. You need a buy-in from all the other stakeholders also, and your project manager and every other major person involved in the project. should be aware of this particular change, right? So you need to have a formal documentation which is assessed for impact and has proper approvals from stakeholders and others. Okay, so that change control, be sure that this is in place. And then the testing documentation, like as I mentioned earlier, there will be requirement of detailed test plan, test cases, sometimes something called as test scripts required. So if you're joining as a business analyst at a level below the mid senior level, you might also be involved in the process of test case creation. So being aware of it as to how you should create it, and then ensuring that you're covering all the negative scenarios, exception scenarios apart from your happy path, that really creates a difference. Okay, so when it comes to documentation for waterfall, these are the points. If we have to talk about the agile, so in agile, we had seen earlier itself that user stories is the basic fundamental block for requirements documentation. So this is the part wherein you use this format of as a I want, so that you remember I give an example also when I was explaining this. Or if you have to look at another example, maybe I'll say as a customer, I want to successfully make the payment so that I can receive the order confirmation. Okay, so that will be the user story followed by acceptance criteria. So this sort of user stories creation should happen in a proper manner. Okay, because this will be used as a primary means by the entire technical team, developers, testers, support, and all, to ensure that the feature which is going to be provided is really serving the business requirement. So we should be sure of having all the details in this format. Okay, there is a term called as backlog. What it implies is nothing but, let's say that you are aware of 10 things related to a feature which are supposed to be launched. Obviously, all of those 10 things cannot be developed, tested within a span of 2 weeks of time, which is the duration of a typical sprint. So what you do is you keep those user stories ready, and maybe the team will work only on the initial 4 or 5, and the remaining 5 will be placed in something called as a product backlog. Okay, so ensuring that your product backlog is there in place, and it has the all the business requirements understanding that you have already included in those backlogs, that is something which you should ensure. And iteration planning is nothing but planning for the next sprint. What could ideally be the next list of features, or existing features, next set of requirements which can probably be picked up by the team to develop. You will be doing some sort of planning from your side, right? So having this backlog and iteration planning in place, okay, and working on it much before even development team is ready to pick it up, that becomes very important. Okay, and making sure that those user stories which are supposed to be taken up by the development team for the next sprint or the sprint after that, you have kept all the details ready from your side at least. Okay, that is something which you should ensure. What happens is once you ensure, then what happens? Then it is like you have kept your understanding into that. Then when it comes to plan along with the team on the development part, they'll come up with few more suggestions or improvements or reduction in the requirement details, etc. So you will be able to update it since you have the basis already in place. Okay, so that is how you need to make sure of putting things in place. Don't worry about it if you're not aware of backlog, what is backlog roaming, and iteration planning, daily stand up. Don't worry about it. We will touch upon all of these points when we talk about agile. Okay, we'll spend a couple of sessions on it. So there we'll talk about the at a high level, at least we'll try to see what is a scrum ceremony, and uh, what do you do as a business analyst. We'll look into those things, so it will be clear at that point. Daily stand up is nothing but a regular huddle of the team to understand on what is the current scenario of the progress on the project and who is working on what. Okay, these stand ups will be very helpful because the team gets to meet and discuss together about what is being developed at that point of time. And in these meetings, some additional points come up which can be used to make the product launched to be better. So you can use the points from these stand-up meetings and improve the acceptance criteria of the existing user stories, right? So whenever daily stand-ups are happening, make sure that you're making notes of all those points which are coming up, and see, analyze if it is really possible to be improved, implemented, and all. So that is going to be one more area where you're getting some, changes or modifications to your existing requirement details. Okay, so be sure that you're being wary about the points that are coming up in the stand-up meetings, because that will add or that will enhance your requirements. Okay, so this again leads to incremental documentation. So unlike your waterfall, where you have a sequential documentation, like everything is created initially itself, here it is like, you're building block over the block. Over a period of time, you'll have the entire thing in place, right? So this incremental documentation is something which is like, Agile encourages something like this, which is just in time. You prepare right now documentation for these next 2 weeks, then you add on to it, and that will be picked up in the next 2 weeks, so on and so forth. So your documentation of requirements is a never-ending process in that way, if you look at it. So because of lack of upfront documentation, you will keep on working on these points every now and then. So you should make sure that you're keeping your documentation up to date with the team. The entire team is aware and aligned on these updates and all. How that happens? It happens by using the collaboration tools like Jira, things like that. So you need to be a little aware of how that happens. Okay. The next thing is retrospectives. So here what happens is the team at the end of every sprint will reflect on what went well and what could be improved. And here also sometimes, though not specific to the requirements, some suggestions might be coming up from the team members on how things can be better. So again, you need to keep these things in mind, so that when it comes to documentation also, if there is any particular suggestion provided, you make sure that you're following it from the next sprint onwards. That will help the team, that will help the entire project itself. Okay. Then you have something called as testing and validation. So here what happens is, unlike waterfall, where the entire testing happens at the last phase of the project, here you have early testing, and often multiple cycles of testing keep on happening. So there will be some sort of documentation done for this also, at a very minimal level, of course. But if there is any automation testing involved, making sure the QA is following that, and if any automation testing scripts are being used, ensuring that it is covering all the probable error scenarios, negative scenarios, and all. That is something which you may not be doing by yourself as a BA, but you should be uh, regularly in touch with the QA team to ensure that all these things are followed very well, so that you don't have to really add into these documentations at a later point of time. Okay, documentation of a particular requirement which was covered in sprint, say sprint 5. Mostly whatever has been picked up should be closed by sprint 5, sprint 6 itself. It should not happen that in sprint 12 again you're looking at a requirement which was fully developed and tested in sprint 5, right? So how can you ensure that is by making sure that the testing which is happening is thorough. And for that, you will be constantly in touch with testing team to ensure that they are covering everything, they're adding the proper evidences for it and all. And finally, the client collaboration. Again, you will have the client collaboration happening throughout the project, right? So usually it will be your product owners from the client side with whom you will be interacting. Sometimes it could be the actual stakeholders also in Agile, but more often than not, it will be usually the product owner with whom you'll be discussing. So maintaining a constant and smooth rapport with the product owner will help in getting the regular reviews, feedback from them, and that can in fact help you in refining your requirements and ensuring that alignment which you need with the business needs. Okay, so you need to make sure on all these points. Having said this, one thing that I would like to say is that you should be clear with the end objective. The end objective is that your documentation clearly reflects, without any ambiguity, the business objective, so that stakeholders will be able to uh, see what they are actually expecting whenever a demo of the product happens and all. So that is your end objective. So whatever you do, be it waterfall, be it agile, or be it some hybrid methodology or whatever it is, if this point is at the back of your mind when you're documenting, you can make sure that every task that is involved in the entire project that you are responsible for, you will keep this in mind that okay, at the end this is what I need. So how can I make my existing task, more aligned with this thing? Okay, so that is a major point. And do not worry if you're a little bit not aware of any specific point that has been mentioned, because most of the things for a business analyst happens like more like on the job learning. Okay, depending on the work culture, depending on the nature of the project, depending on your team bonding, a lot of things become a little bit more uh, aligned once you spend the initial few sprints or initial few weeks of time with the team, and then you'll get to know what's the flow and you'll go according to it. Okay, so be aware that there is something like this in place. In waterfall, this is what happens. In agile, this is what happens. And on top of it, how you add your own flavor to it and make sure that things are all running very well for the entire team and the project, that depends on how you involve yourself and make things easy for yourself and everyone. Okay, so that's it for now. As I said, this will close the documentation point. But okay, let me also mention one more point. Depending on the project again, the type of documentation expected could be something more than what we expected. Okay, what if suddenly the client says, "I want activity diagrams to be added in the functional requirement document"? It might as well be happening. Or what if they say we need a BPM, business process modeling related diagrams, or if they say that we need something called as data mapping. So don't be bogged down when you come across these words, because as a BA you work on different concepts at different points of time in different projects. So whenever you come across something, you search for it, get the information from the net first, and if you know some well established business analyst, talk to them, get an idea, and share your draft version without really feeling like you are completely blank. Share your initial draft, get the inputs, and keep on revising it. That is what works for the BA. As a BA, you don't need to be knowing everything right from day one. As in how the project progresses, you get to interact, you get to learn a lot and implement it. That is what happens for every BA, even those who are having 10, 15 years of experience as BA, the same thing works out. Okay. So keep this in mind and work according to that. Okay. Okay, so we'll close this here. We'll meet in the next video. Thanks, everyone.